Hi everyone, welcome to my first episode of Bookstagram After Dark. I haven't had one since the end of March. Life has been busy and it started working again and stuff, but I wanted to get back into this. My camera as always is a little bit crooked, let me fix it there. I am interviewing Ivy Owens, who you will see who that is in 1 minute. She's just requested to join. Give it a second to load up here. Hello!
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm good. It's good to see your face. Let me just turn my light down a bit. There we
Yeah.
go. Hi.
So I am here with Lauren Billings,
Yeah.
who is part of Christina Lauren, the amazing author duo, but she is also Ivy Owens, who just released this beautiful book, Scandalized. It came out, was it last Tuesday it came out?
Yeah, a week ago.
Oh my God,
that's crazy. It feels like it's been a day.
And it is like, first let's talk about this cover because this is stunning. It is so pretty.
I could talk about this cover all day.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. It's pocket sized, so just so people know, it is a smaller edition than other
it's
books.
A max, so it's like
it's slightly bigger than those mass market books, right?
So like this is the Helen Huang Kiss Quotient, so it's bigger than that, but it's smaller than, like, this is the,
Yeah. Just so that for all of our people who are anal about our shelves, it doesn't quite fit in.
Yeah, it's a little one, but I actually like the size a lot. It's super easy to hold. I didn't expect to like it this much. Yeah.
Yeah. And especially because it's not like, I mean, it's 300 pages, but it's not super thick. Because some of those little mass market ones, when they're so thick, like I kept crease free, so that's always a bonus.
I know, I don't have to crack the spine.
Yeah. So let's talk about how kind of Ivy Owens came about before we get into the book, because I know people are interested. When these arcs started to be sent out, right away I have a group chat with a bunch of Bookstagrammers, and they're like, have you seen this Ivy Owens book? It's so good. Did you hear who it is? Everybody thinks it's Lauren from Christina Lauren.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how did you guys even figure that out? I went and read the author bio, and it could have been a million authors. It could have been anybody. But then they started to kind of tell me little hints, and the K-drama, K-pop thing. As soon as I kind of heard that, I'm like, okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense for them.
Yeah.
So how did Ivy Owens kind of come about for you?
I mean, Ivy Owens wasn't planned. I wrote this as a story for Christina and my friend Kate Claiborne during the pandemic. Just Christina and I were on a break from writing books. I think we had just finished Soulmate Equation edits, and we were taking a month off. And she went to build a garden and build a dollhouse. And I was like, well, I have no hobbies because writing was my hobby, so I guess I'll write a book. And I just did it for fun. It was I think that's one of the reasons why it was so fun, is I wasn't writing it for anything but just the joy of writing. And so anyway, Ivy Owens just sort of came about after the fact, because once the book was done, it looked really book shaped. And we thought, maybe this is something that we want to try and publish. And by we, I mean my agent and I. Christina has always been super supportive. And so we did. We just sold it, and then I had to come up with a pen name, and it was really weird to do that, but
Does it have any meaning to you, or was it just kind of something that came to your head?
It's sort of a play on my kids' names. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Very cute. We won't get into that. But yes,
very
cute. I love that. Were you surprised people figured out who you were, or did you think that you were going to be able to keep it anonymous?
I mean, I had hoped that I was, but turns out I'm bad at it. I think also the arc made it sort of exciting for people, because it was this person has been publishing best-selling romance under another name for a decade. And I think people were like, ooh, who could it be?
Yeah.
And then I had a couple pictures that had a little corner of my tattoo or a bit of my backyard. And I didn't think about that stuff. You know what I mean? But when people who are paying attention, they'll put that together. So I think the bottom line is my intention was really good. And the reason why I wanted to have it be separate is just because I think there is a certain amount of pressure that comes with publishing a new book as Christina Lauren. You know, we have an established readership and we love our readers and we want to do right by them. And sometimes it's fun just to write for the joy of it. And so I think I just wanted to put this book out without any expectations about sales or people's reactions or anything. But I was just like not great at it. And I also started to feel like I was lying a little bit. So anyway, it was good. It felt really good. With like a few days before the book came out, I was like, it's me.
I know, and I loved it. And you know what? And it was perfect promotion for your book because it was like, hey, it's me, and everyone was like, holy crap, or like, I already knew that. You know, it was one or the other.
The timing was totally not planned at all. Like, I had planned to just not ever say anything, and then it just got to the point where I was like, there's no good time. Like, if I do it on release day, it's going to look like it's staged. If I do it after, it's going to look like it's staged. Like, I'm sort of, there's, you know, no way to do it right. So I just did it that day.
It was perfect. I loved it. It worked out great for you, I think. Yeah. No, I don't think anybody had any hardships with you coming out. Like I said, people were either like, oh yeah, I already knew that, or we're like, oh my god, I can't wait.
That's awesome.
Okay, so this book, I absolutely adored it. Oh, the steam. Like the steam. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I've kind of missed your, like, I know you and Christina write the steam together, but I kind of missed that from your guys' book. So I was so excited when like you came in hot from the beginning. Like, I mean, you're like a couple chapters in and they're like in it and you're like, here we go.
I know. And I think that was part of writing it just for the like process of writing too, because I was not thinking about who would be reading it other than these two friends of mine.
Yeah.
You know, so it was like, it was very liberating. I could just write it as like steamy as I wanted. And I didn't have to think about like, are readers gonna, is this too much? Is my mom gonna read this? Like, what's gonna happen? It was just like so freeing. And then when we did sell it, I was like, I am not changing that. Like, I'm gonna leave it in and it's gonna be fine. So
I know. Well, and I love in your author note, I think you said to like your agent or something, you're like, so I've got this really steamy book.
She's like, got it. No problem.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So it starts out with Alec and Georgia, and they bump into each other at the airport first, right? Yes. And then she sees him again in the line at the hotel, and she's like trying to figure out why she knows him.
Yeah.
And it clicks that it's her childhood best friend's older brother, who she also had like mega crush on through her teen years. And so I think right away having that kind of second chance romance, I just love that because it starts with their chemistry being hot. Like right away, they know each other. And I actually had not really read the synopsis. Like I knew there was somebody famous in it, but I didn't really know how it all played out. So I'm like, okay, like why isn't she recognizing him if he's supposed to be famous? And I wasn't sure how it was going to play out. So they end up having this hot and steamy one night stand together, which they think is going to be a one night stand. And then they kind of part ways and they get to the airport and they get off the plane and there's like, oh, these crazy fangirls. And she's like, what is happening? And that's when she kind of realizes like, oh, I didn't just recognize him from my childhood. He's like this big, famous actor. I would say probably more so in Europe and just kind of becoming more popular in America was what it seemed to kind of come across as. And then that's kind of where the story takes off. And just tell me kind of where you got these characters from and why you kind of went with I know you love like K-pop and stuff, so it's not too surprising that you went with like a K-drama kind of star, but tell me how you kind of came up with these two characters.
I mean, I think it was really fun to think about these characters in sort of like in an everyday setting. You know, he's sitting in the airport, he's just like noodling on his phone, their flight is canceled, he has to get a hotel just like everybody else. But one of the things, I remember this story where Sally Thorne, our friend, was traveling, and author, was traveling to Japan. And she texted Christina and she was like, this was like a number of years ago. And she was like, BTS just walked past me through the airport. And like, she knew who they were because of Christina, but I'm sure a lot of people, and a lot of people knew who they were at that point too in Japan. But like, there were probably also a lot of people who had no idea. And so I love the idea of the people who are sitting in that space, like sitting in their chair reading their book, and somebody famous walks by and everybody loses it and they don't know what they're supposed to be looking at. And so it's sort of, I kind of had that in mind when I was thinking about that scene where they get to LAX, because I love the idea that George is like, what is going on? Like, who is this guy? And it all sort of slowly slots into place. But I knew before I wrote anything that I wanted to have a childhood best friend's older brother, because that's like my favorite trope.
Love it.
And I wanted to have a one night stand where they were just like, why not? We're not, neither of us is in our hometown. We have
Mm-hmm.
nothing to lose, nothing to hide. And it's just like super like open and like very passionate. And I think just who they are came after that. Like it all just sort of slots into place. Like she's a journalist. It made sense that she was working on something and it dovetailed with his career too and his personal life. And yeah, I don't know. The pieces all just kind of came together.
Yeah, well, I absolutely adored them, and I thought like I said, the chemistry was so hot right off the bat, which I think, and it's probably why you love that childhood friend's older brother, because there's just that history there, and there's just something
Yeah.
about history that makes the chemistry work so well in a book,
Yeah.
in a romance
Like
book.
they know each other, but they don't know each other super well, but there's still that safety there, you know, because they know
Yeah,
each
and
other's families.
it's a little bit
Yeah.
forbidden, and it's
Yeah.
that, yeah, it's all that good stuff.
It's the
Um,
best.
it is the best. So, so he, and then they kind of part ways, and he ends up getting back in touch with her because he wants to like kind of explain what's going on. And they both fall pretty hard for each other pretty quickly in this book. And
Yeah.
basically right away, she's like, yeah, like, I want to do
I'm
this.
in.
I'm going to like move in with you. I'm like doing this whole deal. And, I really love that, because lots of times, and there was that great hesitation where she was scared and stuff. She had just gone through a breakup like 6 months prior, but I just loved that trust that she had in him. And I think it worked so well too, because she didn't know that he was famous. So you weren't questioning her the whole book and being like, what's her motive? What's going to happen here?
Yeah.
And so I think I really appreciated how you started that, because lots of times with billionaire books or celebrity books and stuff, they know who they are going in. And sometimes it makes you question their intention
Right.
with this famous person, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, in this one, she really just like they have a connection and she feels really both safe but also inspired around him because he does have so much faith in her as a journalist. And I think that's one of the things that I loved about, even though it was insta love, which is not something I think I like to write very much, it was really nice because she really needed someone to believe in her, because the way that her boyfriend before had really broken her was by not telling her that he lost his job. And so he had lied to her for a year and pretended that he was still working. And so she felt as a journalist, like, how can I be a journalist, an investigative journalist, and have not seen this story right in front of my face?
In front of me. Yeah.
And so I think for Alec to be the one that's like, you and only you get to hear this story from me, and you and only you get to be the one that shares this side of the events, I think meant so much to her. And so I think that there's like this sort of inherent safety that was there from the very beginning with them. You know?
Definitely. Yeah. And so she's a journalist, and she's writing this story about this. She sees this story kind of on Twitter, and it's just like this little blurb on Twitter, and it totally intrigues her, and she feels like she needs to investigate it. And she happens to be in London doing something else when this kind of goes about. So she's investigating, like, it's like a nightclub basically is what it is. And there's very questionable things happening. It seems like there's sexual assaults maybe happening of women being drugged. So she's trying to investigate this, and she tells him this in the beginning. And I was so intrigued, because I'm like, he knows something. Like, like, but what does he know? Because I'm like, I don't feel like he's involved. Like, I don't think that's where it's going to go. But I wasn't sure how it was going to fall in place. And then once we kind of talked about his sister a bit more, I'm like, okay, maybe this is where it's going to play in. And sure enough, we find out that his sister, who was her childhood best friend, was a victim of one of these sexual assaults that happened and was filmed. And it was actually her ex-boyfriend and his college buddy who did this. So I think that was also a great bonding moment for them too, because they were both connected to this story that she was so invested in. And I think that also helped that chemistry along as well, for sure.
Oh, totally. I mean, especially because he saw how much it meant to her, like that very first night before he even admitted that he knew anything about it. Because she asked him point blank, like, do you know this club?
Yeah.
And he's like, sounds familiar. And so, from that very moment, she is like a dog with a bone after this thing. She is going to take these guys down. And so he has time to be able to see that passion she has and how much it matters to her. And I think that instills a lot of trust in him that she'll handle it carefully. And yeah, I love that they have this shared need to take care of this horrible thing that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And just so everybody knows, there is a content warning at the beginning of the book. And I think if anybody has sensitivity about sexual assault or any sort of sexual harassment issues, make sure that you consider that before you read this book. There's nothing like explicit on the page, but it is referenced. So
yeah, it's not explicit, and it is like there's lots of story in between, so you could even easily like just kind of skim over those parts because it's, you know, it is part of the storyline, but it's a bit of a background storyline, I would say, the actual sexual assault part of it.
Yeah.
And so then I have to tell you my favorite part because it happens right in the middle. My favorite part in this book is when he calls her and he's like talking, he's like, okay, like,
the phone sex.
The phone sex. And then he shows up and like that, when he was coming in the door, I'm like, oh yes, yes. You know, it was just so hot and sexy. I don't think I've ever read something like that in a romance book before, with the phone sex turning into him showing up and being like, let me finish you.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's that aggressive, kind of assertive in bed. And I just loved it. I love when steam is different because lots of times, you know, there's only so much of, you know, regular penetration and all that kind of stuff. But you also had, I don't know how I can say this on Instagram. He was doing. There was something where a breast were involved as well, and that is also something that I've never really read. I don't think I've ever read in a romance book before.
Yeah, that is like one of my favorite scenes. I love that scene so much. And yeah, I mean, it's funny because these all just were written just like, oh my God, this is going to be so fun. Like, I'm going to write this next thing. Oh, guess what's coming next? And it was almost like like I would text Christina and Kate and be like, oh guys, like I'm planning something fun. I hope you like it. And they were like, this is exciting. But it's like, never was I like, you know, trying to be, I don't know. It was just like so liberating. It was so fun. Just to be,
I love that. I feel like more authors need to like write like this. No timelines, no pressure. Like, and sometimes I've interviewed some past authors that have done indie books, and that's what they feel like their indie books kind of are just those fun books that they just put out. And you can kind of tell that they're just more fun and let go. And, you know, I love that you loved writing this so much because you can tell in the pages.
Oh, good. That makes me really happy. That's like the best compliment you can give a writer. Yeah.
Good. You can tell in these pages that you loved writing this. And that you were probably madly in love with Alec because
I was. It's easy. I love them both. I'm like smashing their faces together.
Yeah. They were both just amazing. And you know what? She was strong. Like, she was a strong character, but I really enjoyed those moments that she was, you know, a little bit more tender and needed a bit more love and stuff, because you can still have a badass, you know, main character that still has, you know, emotions and still gets upset and still, you know, is self-conscious. And I really like that about her, like especially the scene where they go to the signing and she's there with her friend Eden and she kind of feels out of place and stuff. And I really like seeing her in that position because she seems like she's so in control, but I'd like to see her like, you know, she felt like people were looking at her. She didn't feel comfortable there. And I like that in a main character. I like to see them uncomfortable sometimes.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I think also like there's strength in vulnerability. I think when your character is comfortable being real and vulnerable about understandable things, it kind of makes them more dimensional and more relatable to readers, because all of us would be in the position that she was in when she you know, woke up in the middle of the night at his hotel and it's like, what am I doing? Like, I really like this guy. I'm just setting myself up to be hurt, you know, and showing up in the green room where there's all these celebrities and she's just like, am I supposed to pretend like I'm the one he wants? This seems like impossible.
Yeah.
So I did like writing those scenes. It was fun to sort of find her softer sides.
Her softer sides, yeah.
Yeah.
And another part in the book, and it was kind of funny because you do bring it up at the end of this scene, is when they're floating in the ocean on their noodles and talking the whole time. I'm like, they are going to get eaten by sharks. Like, who sits out in the Pacific Ocean on their noodles? I was like, what? And then
Lots
at the end,
of us do. Actually, I will say that little bay that they went to is this like really sweet little cove. And it's not the busiest beach by any stretch in Laguna. And it's like my favorite place to go. But I've never like heard of anybody seeing sharks there.
that was my non-California self being like, they are getting eaten by a shark while sitting out there. But then I love at the end, he does reference it. He's kind of like, well, I'm glad like we haven't been eaten by sharks while we're out here talking.
Right. Like maybe let's go back in.
Oh, so funny. So they're madly in love, and I'll be honest, I had no idea where you were going to go with this book at the end. Like, I had no idea where this breakup was going to happen, if there was even going to be a breakup. Like, I'm like, what is going to be the conflict? Like, how is this all going to play out? Because as the story progresses, he like gives permission for her to use the story of Sunny, his sister, being abused when she makes like kind of the big, outing everybody. And I'm like, okay, well, where's this going to go? Like, he said she can use it. She took the names out. I just had no idea how it was going to blow up. And when it did, I was like, wow. Like, I did not see that coming whatsoever.
Yeah.
We'll say spoiler alert. But, so it ends up that she rescinds, like, putting his sister stuff in there, Sunny stuff in there, because she thinks that's going to do more harm.
Yeah, she thinks she has enough without it. She's like, I don't need to expose the family. I can totally keep that. Like,
so
private.
She releases it. She's super excited. She thinks things are going to go great. And then all of a sudden, and you never really say who releases these, but all of a sudden TMZ, with their ways, get all these photos of him carrying his sister or kind of dragging his sister because she's passed out of there. And right away, the assumption is that he was part of it, and this was a girl that he had sexually assaulted, and shit just kind of hits the fan.
Right, and they also find pictures of him and the guy Joseph, one of the owners, like from college together. So they're like, oh, he's buddies with this guy, and he's carrying this woman with a cloak over her head out to a car, like.
And so, Joseph was kind of like the main bad guy in the whole thing too. Like, he was the one that was seen in all the films. Like, he had a tattoo that they knew and stuff. So I just totally wasn't expecting it. And then I was devastated by the way that he treated her on the phone.
I
was
know.
Like, what is happening?
Scene. I hated writing that scene. That was so hard to write.
Yeah, but I'm glad that you didn't drag it on. Like, I'm glad that it was just like over the weekend, she went to get her stuff done, but he was there. And I'm glad it wasn't something that dragged on and on with their breakup, and they got back together, and they didn't even really break up. Yeah. Anyways, it was just kind of like they got like, a bit of a.
I messed up over the weekend. I never
super stressed. And I mean, who knows how anybody's gonna handle a situation like that, right? Like, I mean, his whole entire world blew up in front of him, and then her world fell apart because Billy, I freaking hate him. I loved him, and then I was so mad that he let her go, and I know it was the powers above, but he frustrated me a lot that he didn't have that kind of trust in her.
I know, you got to fight for your people, Billy.
Yeah, Billy, bad Billy. But yeah, so I'm glad that you made it kind of short and sweet, but it was still powerful, and I think they really learned a lesson on reacting quickly, obviously. And I was really surprised how much she trusted him, even with all the lies that she had been told from her ex, because there's parts where he kind of has to act like he's dating his co-star. Yeah, there's a lot of trust going there, so I really appreciated that she trusted him so much, considering her past.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I mean, I think part of it too is that her ex-boyfriend Spencer hadn't cheated with somebody else. He had just lied to her, and so her injury was one that Alec was already tending to. He was already making her feel like she was smart and professional and like good at her job. And, she was, I think, kind of aware just based on how he reacted to her that he was into it too. Yeah. And, not wanting to lie to herself that like, if this is meant to be, it'll be, but like, this is a long shot we have. I mean, he's like a super famous actor, and, I just have to be realistic that there's always gonna be people after him. You know?
Well, and I love that about the epilogue too. Like, the epilogue was like a little bit messy. Like, it wasn't that perfect happily ever after, right? Like, he was traveling, she was getting all these job opportunities, which you knew was going to happen because of, when she finally released that story with Sunny being, Sunny telling her story. And it's not perfect. And I kind of love that because usually, you know, you get the happily, oh, he asked her to marry him, they stayed in one
Yeah.
place, they lived happily ever after, the
It
end.
took a little while for them to get there. But you know, the thing is, that was the piece. So the whole book I wrote really fast. And for the most part, the book that exists is almost like 95% the book that I wrote initially. But the epilogue I wrote probably 5 times because I just couldn't get it right.
Yeah.
Not what their happily ever after looked like, but just how to tell it, because we had only seen them for 2 weeks together. So I
Yeah.
wanted to try and give a stretch of time where we would see like how they would make this work. And I didn't want it to be like, oh, la la la, she moves to London, everything's fine, they're happily ever after. Like, his career is going to take off, her career is going to take off, they're going to have to navigate that. But writing their future in first person present tense was really weird, just like from
Mm-hmm.
like a reader's ear, it's weird. And I couldn't write it any other way. That was just
Yeah.
the voice that she was using in the book. And so I ended up having to write it over and over, but I ended up really happy with that epilogue.
Yeah.
I like where they end up. I like that it takes them a little bit of time. I like that we get to see that they're like going to work together through stuff, you know?
Yeah, and it wasn't your stereotypical happy, you know, ending, which I love. Like, we, with
Yeah.
romance books, you know, sometimes we need something a little bit different because, you know, sometimes they all just seem the same at the end. You know, they
Yeah.
all move on, like I said. So I
Yeah.
really enjoyed the epilogue as
Thank
well. I
you.
think it ended very well. I think it worked for the characters that they were, because they were kind of free spirits,
Mm-hmm.
and they, you know, it just worked for them. And I just love
Yeah.
that they, like, you know, she took on this romance kind of blogish stories and
Yeah.
letters and wrote a book. And it
Mm-hmm.
was nice to see that much in their future.
Yeah. 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 I like writing their future. I miss them already. It was like too fast with them, but yeah, I think
Yeah,
they're good. They're happy.
they're happy. Now I have to ask you before we wrap it up here, because I loved your side characters. Even though we only got a little bit of Sunny and a
Yeah.
little bit of Yale, we got
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit of Eden.
I love Eden. That
I
was my
love
favorite
Eden.
scene, was when they were playing cards. That's my favorite scene in the book, when Alec and Eden are both trying to make each other feel comfortable, and it's just like,
Comfortable.
I love them. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was fun.
I loved that Eden was like a huge fangirl and was like,
I
how did
know.
you not know? Like, his abs have been on my computer for
I
like
know.
months. But it
Eden is
totally
all
wasn't
of us. I
awkward.
know.
It wasn't awkward though,
I
right? Like, you
know.
did it in such a fun, cute, playful
Okay, good.
way that it worked out. It worked out well. It wasn't like, is she trying to get with him too? It was total
Yeah.
fangirl, right? And
Okay,
that's
good.
just what it
Yeah,
was.
yeah. Yep.
Okay, so someone just said yes. So that is my question. Will we get a book with Eden?
I would love to. I have an idea for Eden's book. I have it kind of outlined. The thing is, like, I really love my day job. Like, I have the best writing career. I have the best friend and writing partner. And we have, right now, Christina and I have kind of an embarrassment of riches in terms of ideas. And we have more books that we want to write than we do time. So I think this one will always be my vacation pen name. Like, if I
Yeah.
have time and we're taking a big break, maybe next summer, you know, I'll write something, but it's going to be like, we'll see,
We'll
you
see.
know.
No
Yeah.
promises, but maybe.
No promises, but maybe. And I would love to do it too.
Yeah,
So,
because I could also use a Sunny and Yale love
yes,
story as
I
well.
know. I love them. Maybe a little novella.
Yeah, that would be. I could do a novella for both of them. Like, just
Yeah.
pop something cute together, a little short story, and I'll be happy. I loved Yale and Sunny. I'm
I
so glad
know.
that you kind of brought that in.
I
That, you
know.
know, Yale was in love with her, and when they showed up at her door, it was just so nice to see that support there, and you could tell that
Yeah.
there's definitely something going on there.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely goes deep. And she's our little grump. Yale was such a grump, but Sunny is Sunny. So, you know, they're cute. I love them.
Yeah.
I had a
Well,
lot more written for them, but it like just didn't work with the whole ending. It just slowed the ending down too much. So,
yeah. Yeah, I think it worked out perfect. You kind of, and I felt like I knew Sunny, like, even though she wasn't really in the book until the very
mm-hmm.
end, I felt like I knew her as a character throughout the book anyways. So
Oh,
it
I'm
worked
glad.
just to have her like pop in at the end. I was like, oh yay, Sunny made her appearance now.
I'm glad. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to put her in more, and it just ended up kind of like clogging up those sections. So I was like, well, this is what we get of Sunny, I guess. This is what it's meant to be. So I'm glad that it worked. That's good.
Yeah, well, and you couldn't have really had her in there much more anyways, because the story was coming through Alec. You
Yeah.
needed the story to come through him because you needed that blow up moment where people thought it was him and stuff. So it just really wouldn't have worked for her to be in it
Yeah, it's true.
much more than that. So
It's true.
Yeah.
Very true.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me.
Thank you for
always
having
a
me.
pleasure. Yes, of course. Make sure you guys check out Scandalized. It is in stores right now. It's a beautiful book. It is steamy. It is hot. It is so good. It reminded me of like old Christina Lauren. Like that's what it kind of reminded me of. I was like, oh, I feel like I'm in like a warm, cozy bath of old Christina Lauren.
Just the three of us hanging out in the bathtub together.
Just with all the sexy men, you know.
That's amazing. Okay, well, I'm really glad. That's good.
Yes,
thank you so much for having me on.
Yes, of course. Thank you for chatting. Take care, everybody. Have a good evening.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye.